Hello teachers, this is the instructional guide for primary 3, term 3, week 10. Okay. For this week, there are two booklets. The second one is a bit complex, especially when students are not used to drawing timeline. So hence, which is limiting to these two booklets. Now, if any of your students are able to complete these two booklets ahead of time, they can always, or they find it a bit easy, you can always get them to do the corrections. I believe there are quite a lot of backlog, right, I recall, right? Because early on, there are questions involving fractions, and some students seem to be unclear about it. So yeah, right, remaining time, please get them to do their corrections. Okay, so for the first booklet, it is about finding duration, starting off with using the so-called analog clock, right, to answer the question. So here, it says Kara left her home at 8:10 a.m. and walked to her school. She reached the school at 8:23 a.m. How long did it take? Now, so if there is an analog clock here, right, you can actually explain to them how it works. One of these notch here represents 1 minute, but it can always count in multiples of 5, right? So the way to count this is they can go 5, right? By now, P3, right? It should, instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you should be able to count in 5s, 5, 10. All right, and then here, obviously, they cannot just count 5 again, right? So they continue 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay. Now, the other way of doing this is ask them, right? If let's say both start time and end time has the same hour, and same thing, AM and PM. So if they identify that hour is the same, only the minute is different, the AM is the same as well, they can just take the later time, right, in terms of minutes, minus the earlier one, right? So 23 minus 10, right? So you get 13. So it's 13 minutes. Okay, they have to look at this condition. There's one way of doing it. Okay, now the other one is duration. What if the, let's see, here the art class starts at 2:15 and ends at 5:15. So they notice that in this case, okay, the hour is different, PM is the same, right? PM, and the hours is different. So you can tell them that if the hour is different, sorry, if the hour is different, the minutes is the same, then they can just take the later hour, 5, right, minus 2. And that will give you 3 hours. Okay. Of course, if they have the clock here to help them, all right, then they can actually count as well, right? So here it can be a bit confusing for some, in fact, because you don't go by the notch anymore, right? You're looking at the hour that's taking place. So from 2 to 3 is 1 hour, from 3 to 4 is 1 hour, and 2 to 4 is 1 hour. You cannot count another 1 hour here because it's not past 6. So it's 3 hours. Okay, so a few ways of doing this. And then you get into the guided practice. All right, quite straightforward. Now, next thing is to find duration using a timeline. So this particular part is important because once they understood how to do this timeline correctly, they will be able to do the second booklet more efficiently. Okay, you have this question here, start 12:45, and then it ends at 1:10, right? So what's the duration? If you were to use, of course, the analog clock to do this here, right? So remember what I said earlier on, right? Hour, in this case, hour is different. Okay, minutes are different as well, right? So what they need to do is they need to look at 12:45, right? How many more minutes before it reaches the O clock? In this case, the next O clock is 1 o'clock. So the note is 15 minutes, right? Put it aside. And then after that, right, another 10 more minutes after 1 p.m. All right, so that's 1:10 p.m. So add together, you get 15 plus 10 equals 25 minutes. Now, how do you translate that into a timeline? So this is something that you might want to draw, right? Although the picture is there. So yeah, so for timeline, right, I get them to draw, always draw a straight line, and then you have a start time and you have an end time. Okay, so here it says the start time is 12:45, and then the end time is 1:10. Right, in order to draw the timeline, so they got to ask themselves, right, 12:45, the next O clock is when? I always say, what is the next O clock? After 12:45, what is the next O clock? Right, the next O clock is 1 o'clock, so it's 1 p.m. All right, and then after 1 p.m., what's the next O clock? Right, So next o'clock is 2 p.m., but here is 1:10. So you don't have to draw the next o'clock in that sense, right? That's possible. So what students need to do is now to differentiate, or rather find the duration from 12:45 to 1 p.m. and then 1 p.m. to 1:10 p.m. Now you notice that proportionally this is wrong, okay, but it doesn't matter at this point in time. More importantly, right, for those students who are struggling with learning how to draw the timeline, right, is to understand where do I draw the intervals. For those who mastered this already, then you can tell them perhaps 1 p.m. here doesn't sound logical, right? Because 15 minutes seems shorter than 10 minutes. Okay, so you can correct that later. More importantly is that they get this, the idea of knowing how to draw this, the intervals here. Okay, so the answer is 15 plus 10 p.m. So do make sure that you get them, they know how to do this. Now, so this is to find the duration, right? Now, what if the hours is the same? Sorry, hours are different, minute is the same, right? And then AM and PM, so they can draw the timeline as well. Okay, start time 9 a.m. and then 2:03 p.m. Okay, so you ask them, so some of them may have to break it up, right? If they're not sure, they may have to break it up into 10:03, then 11:03. That is fine. For beginners, that's fine. But for those who are more advanced, then you can tell them, let's look at 9:03 a.m. to 12:03 p.m. The 03, the minutes are the same. So what they need to figure out is when did it change from AM to PM? That is 12, right? So they can actually indicate 12:03 here. Okay, and then find the duration from 9:03 to 12:03, which is 3 hours, and then 12:03 to 2:03, which is 2 hours. Okay, again, if they are not very confident, right, it is fine if they do this. Right, it is fine if they do this, if they are not very confident. Okay, I'm sure, and even to the stand that they do this. Right, to which days then they have to count 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hours. Okay, so it depends on how advanced they are. Right, but you might want to start introducing this to them. Okay, and then they do the guided practice. Okay, yeah, you can actually guide them along or just get them to do on their own. And the rest of the questions, right, I think are quite straightforward. So I wouldn't want to spend too much time, right, on these here. Okay, perhaps you might just want to go to the last bit of the question where they have some kind of a work problem, right? Or rather the question phrase as a word instead. Let me see. Yeah, perhaps things like how many minutes are there from 11:57, right, to 12:44, right? Even how many minutes are there from 10:05 a.m. 11:45 a.m. So they can do the kind of a few questions, maybe one or two. Okay, there's one that is how many hours. So perhaps let me suggest do one question on 6A. Okay, and then another question that asks for minutes. Maybe I'll leave you to choose, right? It doesn't matter. So any of these that ask for minutes, that's fine. How many minutes? So some question, one question on how many hours, and one question on how many minutes. Then we move on to the second one, which is a bit more complex. Okay, second booklet, which is more complex. Now they have to find the duration, right, in hours and minutes. So it's an extension of what they learned in the previous booklets. Okay, so show them the concept. In fact, the first one in the way with the timeline. So this is actually breaking up the so-called the whole timeline into parts. So from 11:15 a.m. right to 2:25 p.m. Okay, you might want to explain to them the concept of instead of doing 11:55 a.m. to 12 p.m. Why not just do 11:50 count in terms of hours first, right? So 11 to 15 a.m. is 1 hour, and then 12 to 15 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. is 2 hours, right? And then the remaining part, 2 hours 15 to 25 minus 15 with 10 minutes. Okay, so there are no single way of doing it. It's whatever that is most that the student is able to grab the best. Okay. Now, what about this question here? With 5:43 p.m. to 9:08 p.m. Okay. So if they can, as best as they can, they do it in the first hours first, right? 1 hour after 5:43 will be 6:43, and then after another hour, 7:43, and then 8:43, and then you can't do 9:43 because time ends at 9:03. So similar as what we taught just now, if they want to break it up into several 3 hours here, right, 3 different intervals, that is fine, right? But for those who are able to just jump from 5:43 to 8:43, even better, right? They know that I can just skip, right, 5:43 to 8:43, that's 3 hours. After that, right, I need 8:43 to 9 p.m., 17 minutes. 9:08 to 8:08 is 8 minutes, and they add up together, right? 3 hours plus 17 plus 8 is 3 hours. Okay, right? Then get them to do the guided practice. The next one is finding end time. Okay, for finding end time, what they can do is a certain, when the start time is provided, okay, and then the duration is provided, they need to find when it ends. So this is actually quite easy, right? They do same thing timeline, start with drawing 10:19 a.m. and then end time is a question mark. So if they are able to jump from 10:19 to 1:19 because that makes 3 p.m., fantastic. But if they are not familiar with that, then again, I would suggest that you do it the transition, right? From AM to PM, right? That is usually, so since it starts at 10:19 a.m., the transition will be at 12:19 p.m. So they can do it 2 hours, and then another 1 hour to 1:19 p.m. And then after that, 39 minus 19. Okay, so a few ways of doing it, right? Finding start time is working backwards. Okay, so this is working backwards, right? So the end time is given. Now they work backwards. So same philosophy or same approach doing this, except now you're doing backwards. So the duration is 2 hours. Ask them 7:15. You work backwards by 2 hours. What would that be? So they can figure out this 5:15 here. Okay, that's 2 hours, right? Then after that, from 5:15 go by the hour. The next o'clock is 5 p.m. So then they can figure out, okay, so 5:15 to 5 p.m. is 15 minutes. Okay, and 5 p.m. to 5:40, right, it's 20 minutes. Okay, so use the o'clock and to decide the interval, right, ask them, okay, before 15 p.m., what is the next o'clock? That's 5 p.m. Right? Okay, so get them to do the guided practice. And then for independent practice, for them to do in class, this is what I suggest. One question from 1A, right, that asks for the duration. And then one question from 2, right, you can get them to do 2A or 2B, because 2B, yeah, either 2A is raised carefully, so they can do 2B. 2B is about finding the end time. And then one question from question 3, which is start time. So perhaps do B, right? There's time you may want to demonstrate A, but B requires them to draw it entirely. Okay. And the rest of the questions, yeah, I think it's a lot of repetition. So for homework, I would suggest that because this is quite, takes a lot of time. So do not get them to do a lot. And we're also not sure how receptive it is or how students are receptive towards this topic. So I would say perhaps to get them to do maybe the last 4 pages, right? Last 3 or 4 pages. And so after corrections, if we think that they need more practice, you can revisit the book again. Okay, that's it, right, for this week's topic for primary 3. Thank you.